feel like I don't have enough projects going on in the shop right now, so I'm finally going to jump into something that's been intimidating me and try some carving. I don't want to go buy a panel though, so first thing I'm going to do is make these into a panel big enough for my project.
I normally see this done by sketching directly on the material or using a printout and carbon paper to trace it. But I can't really sketch, and tracing sounds super tedious, and I haven't used carbon paper in at least 2 decades. But I do have the new LaserMaster 2 from our tour, and that seemed like the easiest way to get my graphic on the wood. Next up is getting everything roughed out. To do this, I use my trim router and a lot of patience. Fortunately, my Mirka dust extractor fixed the port on my router, and on captive cuts like this, the dust collection is amazing. I never had to stop once to clean out chips. But if I get a CNC someday, that might make this even easier.
All right, now to the fun part. I'm about to start carving. I've got some gouges. These are both number 7 sweeps, 10 millimeter and a 25 millimeter wide. These are feel that I got off Amazon. I'll have links below. After talking to some people and just doing a little bit of research, these seem like a really good deal in quality. So I'm gonna give these a try and let's see how this goes. Don't really know what I'm doing, but I think it's gonna be fun. Alright, that's a lot of fun and going well. I don't know if you could see though, because I'm right-handed, I'm working this way, so it's working against my clamps instead of the stop. So I'm gonna... You can see it's wanting to split. I'm still close, so that's not a big deal. But something that helps is if I give it a stop, then I can control how far it splits. Because it'll only go up to you know, where I've severed the grain. Callie brought me some coffee and took over. Is that fun?
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's looking pretty cool. I managed to make it all the way around, but not without some boo-boos. You can, all those little marks are where the corners of my gouge. Also, just stylistically, here I kind of smoothed out the outside of the curve instead of following the profile, whereas here this kind of follows the profile with the indentation more, and I definitely like this better, kind of like up top here, so I think this is the way to go. But anyway, I think I'm going to switch from the 25 mil to the 10 mil, the smaller one, and time to start working on all these little letters. Really curious too if mallet's going to be the way or if I'm just going to switch to hand for more control. Let's see. Okay, I just finished carving. That was a ton of fun, but I've got this, I don't know, schmutz here around the edges that I need to clean up. So I'm just gonna use my Dremel rotary tool and clean that up. All right, I've got all the little fuzzies cleaned up, went over it, made sure I got everything, and now I'm gonna use some 220 sandpaper, just smooth everything out again, and then we're gonna do a little bit of hand sanding. Now this all sanded, I've got some 320, and I think I'm just gonna ease the edges a little bit and try to hopefully hide some of my imperfections here. I'm gonna do the same thing on the edges of the letters, just being a lot more gentle because I made really small letters, so they're pretty frail. Now before the next step, I've got some grain filler, and I'm going to use that to fill the grain. The reason for the grain filler is next I'm going to do some spray paint to make some shadows, backgrounds, hit the edges. And walnut is an open cell wood, and I didn't want that soaking into the cells, so hopefully now I'll be able to sand it off easily after I spray it. So time to spray. Got it sanded. I'm happy with the fade and what's going on. I've got a really cheap paintbrush that I trimmed and put a little wedge on to hopefully help me with how small I made these letters. That was stupid. And it's time to paint them to kind of help them pop. And I'm nervous about it because I feel like I'm really, really bad at this kind of stuff. So. Now what I've painted, I don't want to change the color of it all, but I definitely want to amber up the wood and warm it up some. So I'm using Halcyon Amber, which is not a wipe on wipe off finish. So I'm mixing it with a ton of water so that way I can wipe it on and off on just the wood to give it the tone I want, and then I can clear cut the whole thing with Halcyon. And to apply it, I've just got a ripped off piece of an old t-shirt, and if you've got any old sweat stains, that helps add a little bit of color too. So. Now that I've toned the wood how I want it without screwing up my paint colors, going to use some Halcyon Clear to top coat everything. And spraying the finish is probably overkill and not necessary. Because of all the nooks and crannies, I thought spraying might be a better option just to get an even coat everywhere. But you don't have a spray rig, no big deal. Probably caught it from the thumbnail, but if you didn't, It's a savings board. How my kids saving their toy money for next time we go to Disney. Well, I got some ball mason jars, and this is what the cash will go into. So I need to come up with a way to hang it, and kind of excited about this. So first I need to make a mold to pour the epoxy in. How things go. Just realized we're gonna have a problem. These are just gonna look way too big on that board. There's not enough room for these. Fortunately, I don't think these are gonna be strong enough to carry change anyway, so we'll just have to swap all their change to bills, which will fit in the small jar fine, which is great, except these are the same size lid. With the less weight though, I think I can get away with there being less support around the lid, so I can shrink this down. Another note though, my plan was actually to cast this so it'd be all clear and just have the jar in there and then unscrew. But I just realized that the threads aren't cut all the way on the lid, so this would actually then be captive. So if I want to be able to unscrew this, I need to actually set the lid itself into the epoxy casting to be able to unscrew. But now I'm thinking, I don't think this needs to be removable, actually. So while I get the rest of this built, I'll decide whether I think this needs to be able to unscrew or not, because it's going to be wide open anyway. Alright, so the silicone has cured. Got my kitchen scale out, and I'm going to mix up 200 milliliters. And the kitchen scale just helps me make sure I get my ratios right. Okay, before I spray it, I've got some mold release, which will just extra insurance. All right, this thing's had a few days to dry. Time to bust it out of the mold. Well, this one, they're both thin. Here's hoping it's as thin as I hope it is. Yeah! Oh, that was lucky. Oh, that was so lucky. I wonder if I can do that again. Oh, I felt it pop. Come on, come on. Oh, yes. Gave these dudes a few more days to fully cure, but the edges are kind of ripply and corners are sharp and the back isn't totally flat, so gotta fix that before we attach them. So I made a mistake. I wasn't wiping the dust, and I'm at 600 grit, but as you can see at some of the lower grits, apparently I didn't do a good job removing the scratches. So this would take forever to remove at 600, so I'm going to have to go back a few, get rid of these, then move back up the grits. Backed up and resanded this up to 800. Now that I'm at 800, I'm going to just rub on some clear Halcyon to cover up the rest of those scratches and give it a nice shine. The Halcyon's had enough time to dry, so time to attach these dudes. trying to drive screws into this right now is going to break it. Definitely need to be pilot hold. So I'm going to use my Star Bond to attach these. Hopefully that holds it well enough to pilot hole it. If you don't have a pile of moving blankets in your shop, you should definitely consider changing that. They're super handy and really cheap at Harbor Freight. The only thing left is I need a way to hang it, and a little trick is you can use a speed square. Even though this only gives you one measurement edge, all these angle marks that you normally use to use it as a protractor, the exact distance of this doesn't matter, but I can pick a mark. I'm going to use 20 degrees, line up the 20-degree line with my edge, and then drill in 3 inches. And do the same thing on the other edge, and then they're going to be identical, because it really doesn't matter how deep this is. So if your specific measurements don't matter, it's a handy little trick to speed things up.
And that's it, folks. My kids have a pretty cool place, I think, to save their gift money to blow on our next vacation, and I learned a lot about carving. Let me know if you're interested in more carving projects or not. Anyway, I hope you learned something, were inspired, or at least entertained. Until next time, make time to make something.